professor of English and creative writing at St. Leo University. And I've been teaching now going on 40 years. In the fall of 2020, I was awarded a sabbatical. I had my whole teaching career. When I was awarded the sabbatical, we were not yet into the pandemic. I had been awarded it a year earlier. So when fall of 2020 came around, I felt fortunate to not have to be going into the classroom, and very grateful that I had time to devote to my writing. I had proposed a different project for the sabbatical, but as the time came for me to get to work, I couldn't wrap my head around it. There was just too much unknown swirling around all of us. If you think back to that first fall, there was so much uncertainty, so much fear, so much loss. We didn't have a vaccine yet. We were in the middle of a pretty toxic presidential race. There was just an awful lot for us to absorb. But there were also very small, lovely moments of joy, and I think a lot of us cultivated gratitude for the small, precious things in our lives that we did have. So I decided I had to change my original project, and it freaked me out because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to make sure I did not squander that very, very precious time. And I wanted to have something that I could bring back to the university that I could, show for the time, but also be proud of. I had read an article by Ariana Huffington where she talked about a challenge and how she was having a lot of difficulty overcoming this challenge, and she decided to use sort of a mantra: do something that's too small to fail. Too small to fail. And I took that to heart, and I decided that instead of setting up a lot of expectations about a collection of poetry, I would just start writing, and I would write small poems, and I wouldn't have any expectations really that they were going to do anything other than kind of be validation for the time that I had. So I came up with some parameters that I could set for myself that would help me achieve this goal of writing something too small to fail. And what I did was I decided to create a little form that it's been compared to the haiku. I took the number for the month, and I took the number for the day, and I added them together, and I decided that that would be the number of words I would have in the poem. So the first day that I wrote was October 1st. So I took 10 and 1 and I wrote an 11-word poem. And the next day was 12 and 13 and whatever. Well, I ended up writing 100 days. And of course, as the poems go on through the month, they get a little bit longer, and I didn't really, again, I had no expectations for this little collection, but ultimately they sort of became a private and also sort of a public documentation of what we were going through that first fall of the pandemic. So if it's all right, I'd like to share a few with you, and then Jenny will, excuse me, I should have brought my water up. Jenny will talk about the photos and how we came together for this beautiful book that was published by Madville Publishing, wonderful small independent press in Texas. And thank you. So I'll just read a few. They don't have titles, they have the date. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'd like to get my glass of water if you don't mind. Oh, is it? Oh, great. I thought you were just being super generous. Thank you. You were. So the second poem was written October 2nd, 10-2, 12 words. How distant it seems, that night toasting friendship on a glittering riverbank. Just going to skip through a couple of them that I think are indicative. The title of the book is All I See Is Your Glinting, and I want to read the two poems that sort of are these title poems in a way. I had a very, very dear longtime friend get COVID in May of that first year, and she got literally deathly ill. She was intubated, and she was put into a coma so that she could be intubated. And she was in that state for weeks, and once she finally was well enough to be taken off of the tube, she was in rehab for weeks and weeks after that. I had probably seen her in January, and of course the pandemic broke out in March. I didn't see her for the first time until the end of October. And these two poems document that and contribute to the title. So 1029, this plague nearly buried you. We hear a horror story of gasps, tubes, collapses, a plea not to die in front of your lover. They turned you face down for nearly a month. The coma, so technicolor, you flew. And then 1030. Don't be scared when you see me, you said. It's been months. COVID, your captors finally vanquished. I look old, lost my hair. Then you undo the lock. All I see is you resurrected. You're glinting brilliant behind your mask. Thank you. Since today is the first, I thought I'd read another one from the first of the month. I'm going to read the 30th and then the 1st. So this is at the end of November, 11:30. I'm locking the gate on this month, like plague-ridden peasants barring the town wall. Here's a psychic deadbolt against brass-knuckle politics and spiraling mortal numbers. Souls float up like emoji hearts. The raw, wretched bruising transforms into a harvest moon. And I'll just do one or two more. So 12:1. Again, I was really trying to find these small moments of joy and gratitude and appreciation for nature too. 12:1. Migrating crows chatter the month's commencement. Winter solstice rocks awake on cardinal wings. 12:13. That was the day that it was announced that we had 3,000 people that had died in Florida. 3,000 dead in one day. As we part with our fist bumps, air hugs, my friend tells me about two we both know, both knew. And I'll just do two more. 12/31, New Year's Eve. Well, by that time we did have a vaccine, which is great. And, you know, I think we all tried to wend our way through the whole holiday season as best we could. It was different. I wrote two poems for 12/31, and I want to read one of them, and then I'll read the last one on January 1st to go with the first today. 12/31, before midnight. She's lost her gold bangle in tissue paper waves, rivers of wrapping paper, an archipelago of bows. Gift giving's over. The room's a glitter reef of camouflage disappointments, unexpected satisfactions. Tomorrow we'll still be searching, sifting through the remains like beachcombers for that small, pure thing. And then the last poem in the book, I actually wrote up until about the 7th or 8th of January, but when we decided to put the book together, I chose the poems that I felt resonated the most, so there's 90 in here. And this is January 1, 2021. Cat's in the window, readying himself for whatever the day may bring. Fireworks already unraveled the pastel sky. We won't look back, not forward either. I'll serve a tray of delectables, something we can pick up with our fingers like so many wishes. And Jenny.
Thank you, Gianna. It was so much more powerful to hear her read the poetry than it is for me to read it myself. So Gianna told you a little bit about her process and how this project came about for her. And I came in at the end of the project after she had already taken it to the publisher. Gianna and I have known each other for probably a couple of decades now. And so I consider her a friend, but I really saw myself as an accompanist to the project, or as Gianna defines it, as a conversation, to add to the conversation of the project. So when I went to select photographs for her to choose from, I asked her specifically, because there were specific dates that she was working with, because there were specific locations that she was working with, and I wanted to know how important it was to her whether that material was documented. And she really gave me complete and total free rein as to what I decided to do. And so I read through the poetry myself one time, and I really tried to define the themes that I found in the work that resonated with me. And then I decided that I wanted to create more of a collective experience of what we had all going through. That the poetry would accompany, that the photographs would accompany the work with the reader, and that they would have the opportunity to sort of have a respite, a resting place between the poetry. So that's how I started. I use a lot of nature in my photography. I take a lot of photographs in nature, in the natural environment. And I felt like that was an area of solace that most people had experienced during the pandemic, and so I chose a lot of nature photography. The book opens with a photograph taken in Americus, Florida, when I went to hear Jimmy Carter preach. I'm going to pass it around so that you can see it. And it opens with an image of a bench. It almost appears kind of abandoned. And you can see a sliver of a person in there. And that would be the last image, the last person that you'd see throughout the book. I wanted there to be a sense of absence that is very much evident in the poetry. And so this is the second image in the book that follows this experience of someone getting up off a bench and starting a journey. So I see this work as sort of follow us on a journey together. And again, I wasn't limited in terms of where my locations were. So this one was actually taken in Europe. And as you can see from this one, it's just a really long expense. You might say it's a pretty photograph, but it really leads you into this sort of long journey. And there's no path for the reader to walk along. There's no entry point into the work. So you're left with this real uncertainty of how long this experience is going to last, where you're going to go next. So I think it's a nice opening or second photograph. What I will mention, if you have the opportunity to see it in the book or up here, that all of the light in this photograph is really the reflection of blue skies. So I tried to pick work that had a lot of ambiguity in it. I'm going to try to navigate moving this with the microphone. Sometimes I'm coordinated and sometimes I'm not. This is another one that's very early in the book. Again, you have this sense of here's a step leading on. So I wanted to keep that path theme going as much as I could in the photography. But you really have a sense of ambiguity in this photograph. Are you seeing water? Are you seeing clouds? If you have the opportunity to look at it much closer, you actually see there's little fish swimming in the clouds. This photograph was in the Rhode Island Center for Photographic Arts as part of work there. And it's a favorite of mine. I just gave it to a friend for her birthday last week. By request, I don't hand out my photographs on purpose. Thank you. So this is around the holidays. And Gianna read several of these poems that actually accompany this work. And this was around the holidays. This is one of the interior images. There are a few. And this is taken in my home. This is some holiday decorations that are on the counter in my home. But the photograph is taken, it captures a holiday object, a tree, a sense of a Christmas tree, in a paperweight. So this whole image is taken through the perspective of a paperweight with the holiday. So I really thought it captured the sense of isolation that Gianna talks about in the poetry with the holiday season. So that's what this work is all about. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm gonna leave this one to last so that I can share something about it. This photo is my favorite. It's a personal favorite of mine. This was also taken at my house. I said at one talk that I have a tax deduction in my future. This keeps up. I was very fortunate during the pandemic. I want to be really clear about that. And I had the opportunity to celebrate with friends, and this was an occasion to celebrate a friend's birthday. And we were at my home. There was about 5 of us. We were outside, keeping social distance still at that particular time in life. So we were sitting separated, celebrating this birthday. And it's typical for when we get together, that one person, we give them a cupcake because we're women and we don't want a lot of sweets, you know. So they were getting their birthday cupcake. So there's one candle, and you know, we were singing, we were still separated, and when she went to blow out her candle, she held her cupcake out like this. And I wish I could remember the month of her birthday, but I thought it was, I remember I laughed, but then later I thought how odd that we really were completely separating ourselves from our own good experiences as well as the sad ones. So it just seemed like a really poignant moment to me. And then the next morning, there's a table about this size outside the back door of my house. And it had rained, very similar to today. And there was a reflection on this table, and the candle was there. And so naturally, I got the camera. If there's a reflection anywhere, I'm going to take a photograph of it. But it's very, it's an important one for me from the pandemic, and not all of these were taken during that period of time. But I also thought it really represented a lot from that period of time. I can go backwards on this one, I think. Okay, hold on. Thank you very much. This image was, a couple of these here now, we'll talk a little about the collaboration with Gianna. She was very generous in what photographs she allowed me, how she allowed me to present them, but at the same time she had really specific feelings about some of the work. And when I first started in on the project, I gave her about 70 images, and in series form and in individual form. And she went through very rapidly. She's very decisive. And I like to talk about it, as several of these people in the room will tell you. And she's very, very, very decisive. And so one of the things that she wanted in a particular photograph was fog. And I thought, I don't know whether I have that, but I had taken this during the pandemic on a walk with friends. And this is actually, again, reflected light. But from a distance, it really, it appeared to give the concept of fog. So I gave this to her, and she willingly used it. And then the publisher, who had a lot more control over the photographs than I'm particularly used to, cropped it, and which actually made it more effective in terms of what Gianna was trying to accomplish with it. So thank you. I like having a van away. I printed this one because when I saw the title, All I See Is Your Glinting, I got very, very, very fixated on glinting and somehow transitioned that to glistening. And so I made this decision before she made the decision to go with sort of singular images. In my mind, I had decided she would probably pick a series of work. And I had taken these photographs, some photographs similar to this, in Captiva during the pandemic, so I was happy to bring something that I had taken during that period of time. And the house that I stayed in on the beach decided to water their plants with sprinklers. That's a whole nother, Cafe Con Tampa talk. But, and so you can see that there's this real glistening in the photographs. And I just thought, in my mind, this was going to be a perfect fit. And she was not nearly as receptive to this. And it is in the book. It is in the book. And I also tried to use repetitive works, not repetitive works, but works from similar series, so that to continue on the path things so you, the reader, when you were on a journey, you weren't constantly being interrupted by a new vision. So she did select a couple of these. And when we got down to the very end, and we did some fillers, she used a couple of these in there. So that made me happy, but I just took the glistening way too seriously. Glinting, glistening, that's where I went. So, and then this one is from the same location, and if I'm not mistaken, it's upside down. This is the second time I've done this in the show. And so I use this because very similar to some of the work I talked about at the beginning, the sense of uncertainty, the sense of isolation. I really like this sunrise effect, but if you look carefully, the path continues. There's an entry point for a path. So that was really important to me to keep that path experience going. So I didn't want the reader to be interrupted by the photographs. And then I'm going to go to the last one. And this one I printed because a collector saw it at a talk and just purchased it. And so I happened to have it on hand. And I wanted to talk a little bit about perspective, because we all had a different perspective. We all had a different journey. We all had a different collective journey. We had a lot of collective experiences, but we all had a different journey during the pandemic. So this was again taken in my home, and I have a water feature in my home, a pool that also has a water feature, so the water, there's constant movement out there. And in the morning, the light will hit that pool at different times. And I have 4 full seasons of work that, from this space. And it looks different depending on what's happening with the foliage. If there's a palm frond that is yellowing and ready to fall off a tree, it'll create these golden highlights in the water. So I have this, and this one is called Autumn, but I have it in a variety of some that are bright blue, there's some that are green. And so what I want to say about perspective, this was probably taken in the morning with the morning light and the color hitting the pool. And then this photograph was taken in exactly the same space, just at a different time of day. But it's a reflection in the same body of water. So I thought that was sort of a nice way to wrap up how the photographs worked.